I still don't have a good explanation for why I agreed to buy something from a stranger online, even now, months later. It felt practical at the time, a way to save a little money on something I needed for school. I've replayed that whole afternoon in my head so many times, trying to pinpoint where things felt off, but it just seemed normal. And maybe that's the unsettling part, how easily I dismissed everything. The laptop was fine, really. It booted up, and everything worked. It was a little slow, but for $70, what did I expect? I spent the rest of that night setting it up and transferring files from my old one. It was mostly for writing papers, honestly. My ancient desktop was on its last legs. I remember thinking how quiet the fan was on this one, compared to everything else I'd used. Anyway, a couple days later, while messing around with the system info, I found something weird. It wasn't a virus, and it wasn't malware. It was a device listed under hardware. It said it was a location module, like a GPS tracker built into the machine. That's messed up. I figured it was probably some kind of security thing. Maybe the previous owner was paranoid, or, this is what I told myself, maybe it was for if the laptop got stolen, a built-in recovery system. That seemed a little extreme, but people are weird. I tried to disable it in the BIOS, but there wasn't even an option. It was like it was hardwired into the motherboard. I searched online and found a forum post about someone else finding something similar in a used laptop. They said it was probably just a marketing gimmick, some company trying to track usage data. That sounded plausible, though. Why hide it? Then I noticed something else. The battery life was amazing. It was unbelievably good. I'd get a full day of work out of it. Easily, my old laptop barely lasted 3 hours. I was starting to think maybe this thing was too good to be true, but I needed it for school. I couldn't exactly return it, and honestly, the whole tracking thing felt distant, like it wasn't really about me. The battery. It really was weird. I started charging it less and less, just out of curiosity to see how long it could go. It felt engineered. Like whoever built this thing or modified it really prioritized power efficiency. Anyway, I had a group project in Intro to Psych with Nate and Kit. We were meeting at this cafe near campus, the Daily Grind, to work on our presentation. I'd been using the laptop there a couple times already. When I got there, Nate was already at a table. But there was a guy I didn't recognize sitting with him. He was older, maybe in his early 40s, wearing a nice but unremarkable suit. He was talking intensely with Nate, gesturing with a pen. I almost turned around. I figured I was at the wrong table, but Nate saw me and waved me over. "Hey, this is Glenn," Nate said, a little too brightly. "Glenn is a family friend. He was in town and wanted to hear about what we're doing in Psych." Glenn gave me a tight smile and shook my hand. He didn't let go right away. His grip was surprisingly strong. The whole thing felt off. I mean, why would a family friend be interested in our intro class presentation? But Nate seemed eager to include him, kept asking Glenn for his insights. I tried to focus on the project, but Glenn kept glancing at my laptop. Just quick, peripheral things, easy to miss. It happened 3 or 4 times. I ended up subtly angling the screen away from him. I even started taking notes on paper just to avoid using it. After they left, Nate apologized. He said Glenn was a bit eccentric. I think Nate was trying to downplay something. I told myself Glenn was probably just nosy, maybe interested in a career change, taking classes later in life. It was a simple explanation. I still used the cafe, but I started parking further away, walking a different route each time, just in case. The Daily Grind was almost empty when I went back on Tuesday. Just a few students hunched over books, the usual low hum of the espresso machine. I needed to print something for Professor Lorne's class, and I figured it was a good excuse to test something. I'd been messing with the laptop's location module again, trying to disable it. No luck. But I noticed something else. If I opened a specific program, a really old clunky image editor that came pre-installed, the module's activity spiked. It wasn't transmitting exactly, more like checking in. Nate was already at our usual table, nursing a coffee. He looked up when I sat down. "Hey," he said, a little too quickly. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just wanted to print something. I think I figured out something weird about the laptop." Before I could explain, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me, his face pale. That's weird. It's Glenn. He wants to know if I'm meeting you." I froze. Glenn, why would he be asking Nate about me? It was unsettling, but suddenly it clicked. Glenn wasn't just nosy. He was some kind of private investigator, hired by the guy I bought the laptop from. Maybe there was something on the hard drive, something illegal, a stolen file, something like that. And Nate was involved somehow, covering for the original owner. Then the lights flickered. Just a quick dip, but enough to make everyone look up. And when they came back on, a man was standing by the entrance, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Not Glenn. Someone bigger, wearing a dark coat, just watching us. Nate's eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw real fear there. He started to stand, knocking over his coffee, and then the automatic doors locked. Not a mechanical failure, but a deliberate click. The air tasted wrong after that, like metal maybe, or just stale. Everyone was huddled, whispering. Nate kept glancing at the doors, then at me, then back at the doors. I tried to get a signal on my phone. Nothing, of course. We were let out 1 hour later. Not by the man in the coat, but by Glenn. He looked flustered. He said there had been a gas leak, a safety precaution. No one bought it. I didn't. Nate and I walked out together, not saying anything, just the sound of our shoes on the pavement. He kept looking over his shoulder. I went straight to campus security and told them everything. The laptop, the tracking, the man, the locked doors. They took my statement and promised to look into it. It felt hollow, like they were ticking boxes. I asked about cameras, if they'd caught anything. They said the cafe's system was old and partially malfunctioning. Convenient. I went home and backed up everything on the laptop. Then I wiped it clean. It felt good getting rid of it. I told myself it was just a weird coincidence. Someone messing with me. Maybe Nate was involved somehow. He was too eager to help with the project, too quick to ask about the laptop. Maybe he'd set this up as some kind of prank, a really messed up one. But then I remembered something. The first day when I was setting up in the cafe, that older man, Lorne, I think Glenn called him, he'd been watching me, not just glancing, watching, and he knew what program I was about to open. He asked about it specifically. It wasn't a coincidence. It was targeted. I started digging into Lorne, hoping for something, anything, a record, an address, nothing. It was like he didn't exist before 1 week ago. I stopped going to the cafe. Just stopped. It felt too open, too watched. I started working entirely in the library, burying myself in the stacks. Even then, I'd pick a Carol facing the wall. Nate kept emailing, wanting to meet, saying he was getting worried. I ignored him. I felt ridiculous, paranoid, but ignoring felt safer. Then the calls started again, not the weird, silent ones. These were normal. Someone calling, hanging up when I answered, always from a blocked number. I started recording them just in case. The police said there wasn't much they could do without a threat. It was just harassment. They said, annoying, but not criminal. I tried to focus on school, on anything else. I even reconnected with Kit. We grabbed coffee a couple times. Harmless, easy conversation. But I found myself analyzing everything she said, looking for something. Was she asking too many questions about the project? About my life? It was exhausting. I started using a VPN, changed my email passwords. It felt like building a fortress around nothing. 1 week after that, I got a text. Just one word, soon. Same blocked number. That's when it clicked. It wasn't about the laptop. It wasn't about the project. It was about me. Someone hated me. Someone I'd wronged. Maybe years ago? Someone holding a grudge. A former classmate? A disgruntled ex? It felt personal. Now, before I agree to anything, coffee, a study group, even a phone call with someone new, I run a reverse image search on their profile picture. Every single one. It's ridiculous. I know people think I'm standoffish. Weird. Kit stopped texting, but I need to know who I'm letting into my space. What else could I do? And sometimes, when I see a face I recognize from those searches, a face I don't remember ever meeting, I wonder who else is already inside my circle. Who invited them in? I still remember the chipped formica of the kitchen table, a sort of pale avocado green with darker swirls. It was late August, right before classes started, and I was furnishing my first apartment on basically no money. A listing online promised free furniture, a student moving apparently, or a parent cleaning out a place. I drove to a house a little ways from campus, expecting something quick and easy, and hoping to snag a decent desk. The chipped formica of the kitchen counter felt cold under my elbows. I was unwrapping a mug, one of the things Edna had given me, and trying to decide if I should just risk using the instant coffee or walk to the corner store. It was a surprisingly nice mug, actually, thick ceramic, a faded floral pattern. Not something I would have picked out for myself, but fine, useful. I'd gotten the bookshelf mostly assembled, shoved against the wall in the living room. Still needed to organize it, but at least it wasn't leaning precariously. Edna had been oddly insistent, I take it. She said her husband Harvey had built it himself years ago, and they were downsizing, which, okay, fair enough. People downsize. It was when I turned back to the counter, setting the mug down, that I noticed it. A photograph, tucked under the edge of the placemat Edna had also given me. It wasn't with the placemat, exactly, more like placed deliberately beneath it. I pulled it out. A girl, college age, maybe, standing by the campus library, smiling. I didn't recognize her. I flipped it over, nothing written on the back. Just another one, and another, hidden under the coasters. Inside the sugar bowl, taped to the underside of a chipped ceramic cat Edna had thrown in as an afterthought. All girls, all around the same age, all smiling. All familiar in a way I couldn't place. Like faces I'd almost seen before. Maybe Edna did some kind of photography club thing, or Harvey did. It was a weird habit hiding pictures like this, but people have weird habits. Probably just sentimental. Old photos they didn't want to throw away. I stacked them carefully and figured I'd ask Edna about it next time I saw her. It wasn't creepy. Not really. Just unexpected. I tried to forget about the photos. Really, I did. It was easy enough during the day. Work, grocery shopping, the usual. But at night, in that apartment, it felt different. Like I was an intruder in someone else's story. I started double-checking the locks, which was dumb. It's a secure building. Still, I started noticing things, small things. A book on the shelf slightly askew. A coaster moved a few inches from where I'd left it. Nothing major, just off. Then I noticed the curtains. I always leave them open a crack, just enough to see the streetlights. One morning, they were fully closed. I distinctly remember opening them the night before. I figured I must have been more tired than I thought. Maybe I'd subconsciously closed them. I started making a point of checking them first thing. Yesterday, though, it wasn't the curtains. It was my bag. My work bag. I always put it on the hook by the door. Always. But it was on the kitchen counter, unzipped. Nothing was missing, but it felt deliberate, like someone had been looking for something. I remembered Edna mentioning Harvey used to be a carpenter. Maybe he'd been back fixing something without telling me. It was a thought, a flimsy one, but better than the alternative. I called Trudy, one of my coworkers, and asked if she'd seen a girl with dark hair, around my height, near the building. Trudy thought I was losing it. "You okay, Kenji?" she asked. "You're acting weird." I went through the photos again. I spread them out on the floor, and that's when I saw it. A small, almost invisible date scrawled on the back of one. 2019. I moved in last year. These weren't old family photos, these were recent, and every single girl, they all went to state. I checked the student directory. All of them, all former students, all disappeared from social media around the same time. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every creak of the building, every shift in the pipes, I was already sitting up, listening. I kept telling myself it was just the old wiring, the settling of the foundation. But I kept thinking about those photos, and Edna. She seemed so pleased to be helping me get settled, offering the furniture, the lamps. It felt wrong now. I decided to go through the boxes in the spare room again. The ones Edna said were attic finds from the previous tenant. Mostly junk, old books, some chipped china. I pulled one down, and the bottom was taped shut with thick packing tape. It wasn't like that before. I remember thinking it was odd, but just figured it had been overlooked. I got a knife from the kitchen and cut the tape inside. More photos, but these were different. Not of students, of me. Taking out the trash last week, walking to the grocery store, standing at my window. The quality was bad, blurry, but unmistakably me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Someone was watching me, and not just recently. Then I heard it. A floorboard creaked upstairs. My upstairs. I live on the top floor. No one should be up there. I froze, thinking maybe it was just, I don't know, a squirrel, a bird in the chimney. It creaked again, closer this time, a slow, deliberate step. I held my breath. Then a shadow moved under the bedroom door. Just a flicker, but enough. I didn't think. I just ran out the front door, down the stairs and into the street. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My phone was inside. Everything was inside. I just kept walking, hoping someone would see me, anyone. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone following, but there was nothing. Just an empty street, and the growing realization that Edna hadn't been helping me. She'd been setting me up. The police finally let me back in with 2 officers, Harvey and Denise. It smelled stale, like dust and something else, something sweet and cloying I couldn't place. They didn't seem to take it seriously at first. They kept asking about forced entry and valuables. I pointed to the bedroom, the photos. Harvey just sighed. College kids, probably a prank. Some guy with a hobby. Denise was more thorough, photographing everything. She kept asking about Edna, where I'd met her. I told them about the furniture, how she'd practically insisted on helping me get settled. They took statements and dusted for prints, mostly mine, apparently. They found nothing upstairs, nothing to explain the shadow, nothing at all. I started taking my own pictures. A frantic attempt to document everything. Every angle of the photos, the specific placement of the furniture, the odd scratches on the floorboards. I wanted proof. I needed to be able to show someone, anyone, that I wasn't losing it. I thought if I could just get it all down, organize it, it would make sense. But the photos, they weren't just of students. There were pictures of women who hadn't been students. Older women, women who looked like Edna, and then there were dates on the back of some faded ink, dates going back to 1988, 1993, 1999. I showed Denise. She looked at them, then at me, with this pitying expression. Old photos, sir. People collect things. Maybe she just liked taking pictures. She said it like she was explaining something to a child. It hit me then. It wasn't about me. Not just about me. This wasn't stalking, not in the way I thought. It was a collection, a historical record, some creepy obsessive project, and I'd walked right into the middle of it. I felt a little foolish, relieved even. Maybe it wasn't dangerous. Maybe it just was sad. Harvey told me they'd look into Edna's background but didn't sound convinced. They left, and I was alone again, surrounded by ghosts and photographs. I tried to lock the door, but the lock felt wrong. Like it hadn't been changed in years. Like it hadn't been meant to keep anyone out. Denise called a few times after that, just checking in. Harvey mostly sent texts, short ones. Anything new? You holding up? I kept telling them there wasn't. Not really, just the photos. They'd taken a bunch for evidence, of course, but there were still so many. I started going through them again, trying to find something, anything, that would make sense of it, a pattern beyond just young women who went to the university. I noticed a lot of them had a background. Not a scenic background, but details. A specific coffee shop, a bus stop near the library, the park by the old science building. Like he was documenting where they were, not just what they looked like. It made me think maybe he wasn't dangerous. Maybe he was just lonely. A harmless eccentric who liked to observe. That's what I told myself. Anyway, it was easier than the other option. I moved everything into one room. I piled the photos on the floor, trying to sort them chronologically. That's when I found the notebooks, small leather-bound things hidden inside some of the photo albums. They weren't diaries exactly, just dates and times and locations, matching the photos, each entry meticulously aligned with a face, a moment captured on film. I haven't stayed in a hotel since. Not really. I check the vents now, every time. Not because I think someone's in the vents, but just to know, to see if they've been moved, if anything looks disturbed. It's stupid, I know, but I need to know if someone else has been through the space before me. I still wonder how long he'd been doing it. How long had that house been watched? And how many others were there, beyond the ones in the photographs? The chipped ceramic of my coffee mug sounded like that engine, actually, a very specific low thrum that instantly took me back to a November night years ago. I was a student then, buried under midterms and fueled by lukewarm coffee and the promise of all-nighters with friends. We'd formed a study group that met at the city library, and getting there late meant relying on those app-based car services everyone was using. It was just supposed to be a ride home from a long evening. The heat was up in the car, perhaps a little too high. Not uncomfortable, just noticeable. I hadn't adjusted it, but I hadn't said anything either. November in the city, you take what you can get. The driver, Silas I think his name was, kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Not in a creepy way, just frequently, like he was checking something or someone. He broke the silence, which was a relief, honestly. So, finishing up a big project at the library? Yeah, I said. Final paper for Professor Howell's seminar. Brutal. Medieval Icelandic sagas, right? And that's when it started to feel off. Again, I mean, he'd mentioned the sound, that ridiculous little music box tune from when I was a kid, and I'd kind of dismissed it as a weird coincidence. But this, nobody knows I'm taking Hal's class. It's a really specialized thing. I hadn't even told my parents. How did you know? I asked, trying to sound casual. He just smiled. A small, tight smile. Small city. People talk. Plus, the library's a popular spot this time of year. It was a weak explanation, but I clung to it. It made sense. Students cramming, sharing info. Probably someone had mentioned it to someone who, I don't know, it was plausible. The radio was playing really quiet jazz, and I noticed the smell inside the car. Not bad exactly, more like cinnamon and something metallic underlying it, like old tools. Are you a student yourself? I asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards something normal. Silas laughed, a short burst of sound. Not for a while. I just help people get where they need to be. The jazz station faded into static for a second, then back. Silas didn't seem to notice. He was talking about my thesis. Not the topic of my thesis, which was obscure enough that even my parents struggled to feign interest, but specific arguments I hadn't even fully formed yet. Ideas I'd only jotted down in my notebook, things I hadn't discussed with anyone. You're wrestling with the deconstruction of post-structuralist narratives within the context of rural folklore, aren't you? He asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. It wasn't a question exactly. More of a statement delivered with the expectation of agreement. I swallowed. How? How did you know that? He chuckled again, that dry, rustling sound. A student of the human condition, Mona. That's all. I didn't buy it. Not for a second, but I also didn't want to be rude. It was a long ride to campus, and I hadn't even confirmed he couldn't have overheard something. Maybe at a conference, a lecture? I'd presented a preliminary outline at a small symposium last month. It felt flimsy, but it was something. I did present some of it at a symposium, I offered, hoping for some kind of acknowledgement, a confirmation that it wasn't some bizarre targeted knowledge. Silas just nodded slowly. Ah, so you're on a schedule. Is a deadline approaching? End of the semester, I said, then immediately regretted answering. He was fishing. He turned onto Elm Street, a route I never took. There's a shortcut. It avoids the construction on Maple. It didn't make sense. Elm added at least 10 minutes. I opened my mouth to say something, to ask him to go back, but then I hesitated. Maybe he knew something I didn't about traffic. Maybe he was just trying to be helpful. I just looked out the window. The cinnamon metal smell was stronger here, clinging to the upholstery. He kept glancing at me. Not directly, but in the rear-view mirror. Quick, assessing looks. It wasn't aggressive, not exactly, but clinical. He adjusted the heat, even though it was already warm. You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself with this paper, Ray. Dr. Hal is exacting. How did he know about the paper? I hadn't mentioned it. I hadn't even said Dr. Hal's name. I just want to finish it, I mumbled. He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Of course, everyone does, especially when it concerns a pivotal moment, a turning point. He slowed, then pulled over onto the shoulder. Not a proper stopping point, just the side of the road. Elm was mostly woods here, dense and dark even with the afternoon light. We're here. Here? This isn't. The drop-off. He smiled, finally meeting my eyes. They weren't kind. Uwe is expecting you. He's been preparing. Uwe? Who the hell was Uwe? I fumbled for the door handle. He didn't seem to notice, or he didn't want to notice. He was already reaching into the back seat. My breath hitched. He pulled out a small velvet box, dark blue, like the ones they use for engagement rings. Except it wasn't a ring inside, it was a key. An old-fashioned skeleton key, polished brass, gleaming. For the cabin, he said, handing it to me. The cinnamon metal smell was overpowering now, making my head spin. He said you'd be needing this. It's a delivery, really. A long overdue delivery. He reached across the console, his hand covering mine. Cold, sticky. I yanked my hand away. That's when I saw the glint of metal underneath his sleeve. A knife. He wasn't trying to help me get to school. He was selling me. To someone named Uwe. I threw open the door and scrambled out, running blindly into the woods, thorns ripping at my jeans, the key digging into my palm. I didn't look back. I just ran. I tripped, falling hard, and when I scrambled to my feet, I saw it, scratched into the bark of the nearest tree. A single elegant M. Mona. The M, it just kept looping in my head. Mona? I hadn't thought about that name in years. Not since everything with Ray. Ray would have known what to do. She always did. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail twice. That wasn't like her. I checked my data. It showed full bars. Something was wrong. I walked back to the main road, figuring I'd flag down a car and explain the situation. No luck. Hours passed and cars just didn't stop. It was like they couldn't see me. Finally, a state trooper arrived. Thank God I told him everything about the driver, the cabin, and Uwe. He listened, but his expression wasn't disbelief. It was pity. He ran my plates and my license. Then he asked about my research, specifically my thesis. He asked how I was focusing on isolated communities and the psychology of long-term solitude. He knew what I was studying. I hadn't told the driver, hadn't mentioned it to anyone outside the university. He asked if I'd been having trouble with anyone, any disputes. I told him about a minor argument with Hal, a classmate, over research materials. The trooper made a call and then looked at me with a grim face. He said, "We've had a report. Someone filed a complaint, an accusation of academic plagiarism. Someone claims you used their work in your initial proposal, Hal. It had to be Hal. He was competitive and petty. It all clicked. This wasn't a random abduction, it was a setup. Hal had somehow gotten to this driver, spun a story and gotten me out here to discredit me or ruin my career." The trooper drove me to the station and took a statement. He said they'd look into it, but I could tell he didn't believe me about the driver knowing my thesis. He kept asking about Hal. I felt exposed, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. And the worst part, knowing someone knew so much, had anticipated so much. It wasn't about Hal. It was about knowing. It wasn't about Hal, but not knowing what it was about. It took months to untangle the plagiarism accusation. Months of emails, committee hearings, and feeling like I was perpetually explaining myself. Hal, predictably, denied everything. He said he was just worried about academic integrity, that he'd noticed similarities and felt obligated to report them. It felt small, too small to justify everything that had happened. The driver, the woods, Uva, it didn't add up. I started checking backgrounds. Every single person who offered help, even with something minor. A plumber, a dog walker, anyone. It became exhausting. I lost out on a research assistantship with Vera, a woman I'd admired for years. Her student volunteers were vetted through the university. I insisted on running my own check, just to be sure. I found a minor infraction from her son, something about a traffic ticket he hadn't disclosed. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I told the department head I wasn't comfortable. People thought I was paranoid. Maybe I was. I still do it every time. A new colleague, a friendly face at a conference, even someone offering directions. A quick search. Licenses, records, anything I can find. It's become automatic. I tell myself it's about control, about making sure I'm never caught off guard again, but I think it's about the feeling of being watched, of someone knowing things they shouldn't. I thought it was about Hal, then Uwe, then something bigger, some conspiracy. Now I realize it wasn't a conspiracy. It was a delivery. Someone wanted me somewhere, and they used everything they knew about me to get me there. Just now, walking back from the bakery, I caught a whiff of it. Cinnamon and metal. Not the bakery itself, though, just in the air, like someone had walked past a moment ago, and I froze.